Hey everyone, welcome to Group Text. It's a little bizarre that when I say Olympic gold medalist, it is just one line on the resume of my guest today. I mean, that's usually the peak. But Tara Lipinski is also an accomplished producer, documentarian, commentator, actress, and now TV host with her own new show, Wedding Talk, on the Chicken Soup for the Soul streaming platform. Welcome, Tara.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I mean, it is kind of bizarre that that's like and she was also.
It really is crazy when I think about my career and all the twists and turns and adventures it's taken me on. I think, I feel grateful though, because I think why it has is because it had to, because I started so young. I was 15 years old when I won my Olympic gold medal. So I definitely had to figure out what was next and figure out how to evolve and figure out the next part and chapter of my life.
Well, there's so many chapters. I'm just going to try and go kind of in order.
Okay.
So we don't bounce all over the place. Okay, you just said you won. You were the youngest ever at 15. That was Nagano in 1988. 98, sorry. That's what it says. If I could read today in my notes, that would help. 98. What? I always wonder, because I was actually just talking to someone about, for comedians, like the first time they do a major show and their stand-up goes well, it's like they hear silence after. What was the thought, your first thought, when you realized you had won the medal?
It's just such a surreal moment, and I had won nationals and worlds before that, which are obviously, big accomplishments, but it was so different because this one event, the Olympics, for Olympians and for people that dream of going to an Olympic Games or potentially standing on top of the podium, it's a lifelong dream. And even though I was so young, my entire life, I had dreamt of this moment. And then all of a sudden at 11:02 on February 20th, your life changes forever within a matter of 4 minutes. And it was just such a surreal feeling that I think I don't really always know that it happened. Even to this day, it feels like a dream. It feels like something otherworldly because, 1 minute your life changes and all of a sudden you have what you dreamt of and it all went perfectly, which seems miraculous if you think about it. Skating on, a thin blade, one small mistake would have changed the course of that.
Do you think being young helped you? Because you don't have, most people at that age, especially if they've been in a sport where it's been your life, you almost don't process the level of nerves.
For so long, I used to say, I think it helped, it gave me a sense of fearlessness that you have only when you're young. But, I feel like in my older age now, I actually have a different perspective on it. I think it was actually harder. I think because I was so young and looking back at how I dealt with, the obstacles and the ups and downs of my career are so different than how I deal with them as an adult.
Well, I hope so. I hope you've grown since you were 15.
Right. But in the way that like I had to be an adult at 15, that was my day job. That was, I had a team around me. I was working from pretty much 6 years old. And looking back, I just don't think I had, the perspective that comes with age. So I think it made it a lot harder because for me, it felt life or death. It felt that if I didn't win or if I didn't land a jump, my life was over. It's like you're in high school and you break up and you think, my first breakup, I'll never love again, it's over. And you have these very dramatic emotions. And I think for me, looking back at my career, if I had a more adult perspective and if I had life experience behind me where I realized skating is so important, but it's not everything. And I'm going to be okay. If I don't win, I'm going to be okay if I make a mistake. It would have been a lot more comfortable of a journey where I look back and I was stressed as a kid.
Well, if you think about it, 15-year-old teenage girls are not the most emotionally stable humans to start with. Everything is life or death. Everything is very big.
Right. And that's hard to do when you're on a public stage and you're skating, on ice that's slippery, and it's not always going to go well. And I think that, looking back, I definitely think that was a struggle for me. And I think that I took it so seriously that I wish I could have had a little bit more levity and a little bit more understanding of what was happening. But again, you're 15, that comes with age.
Did you really stand on your parents' Tupperware while watching the Olympics and receive imaginary medals when you were little?
Well, see, the story is really taken
on a life of its own. Yeah.
Yeah. With medals and things like that. But I asked to stand on a Tupperware bowl because back in the day, in the 80s, 90s, the Olympics, everyone watched. Every family sat around and watched the ceremonies, the podium ceremonies, and I just loved it with the music and the flowers. And so, yeah, that's a true story, but it got a little out of hand with receiving
with
medals.
Time.
Yeah.
So you started ice skating and roller skating at 3. How many pads did your parents put on you? I could not imagine. I could not imagine how many. I mean, I know what I did to my son when he would skateboard, and he was already like 7.
Yeah, no, but I feel like also back in the day, it was much more just, go out and take a tumble.
Go ahead, crack your head open. You don't need a helmet.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, when I started skating, the greatest part was I really got into it for a free Care Bear because my mom and her girlfriend, who had a daughter the same age as me, it was in the newspaper of like, go to this local roller rink for a group class and you get a Care Bear. And, in the 80s, I was very much into a Care Bear, but it was fine print of after 12 lessons. So we stuck it out for the 12 lessons, and my mom has that Care Bear frame, the Care Bear from hell in her home.
Little did you know that a Care Bear was going to launch your entire career. Did you do any other sports as a kid?
I tried a lot. My parents put me into a lot. They weren't into sports themselves, so I feel like they really wanted to give me that opportunity. So I tried gymnastics and soccer and, all of the things, but nothing really stuck. I had a hard time. My mom said really staying motivated to want to go back to certain sports or classes. And with skating, I was hooked. I loved it. It was such a social thing. We put on these shows, we did dress up and choreography. So it was something I loved from the start.
I'm always curious for someone who achieves something like at such a young age, like you did, what kind of kid were you? Did you rebel? Were you cranky? I look back at my life and I'm like, oh man, my son is so much easier than I ever was.
Oh my goodness. I think sports shaped me a lot, where I was just a little, probably more on the nervous Nelly, wanting to be perfect side of things. So I really I can say this, I did not cause my parents any problems. I just they told me you cannot drink until you're 21. And I just thought that is 100%. I cannot. And I never did. And I was a bit of a rule follower. But what's funny is, I feel like later in life, I feel like when I hit my 30s, I finally was like, Tara, just gotta loosen up a little bit. You gotta have some fun here.
When I was thinking about today, and I'm like, God, she won at 15. It struck me, you won an Olympic medal before you had a driver's license.
Which is insane.
Which was more nerve-wracking.
Definitely the Olympics. I mean, nothing will ever compare to that. I use that as a gauge for whenever I'm nervous about something. I just take myself back to that moment. And somehow I'm like, okay, I'm fine. Whatever else you throw at me, I don't have to go stand center ice in front of a million people. So
basically, during your driver's test, you had the window open, a cigarette, and a set of sunglasses, and driving with one hand. Is that how that went? Something people always talk about, and I always have known that ice skaters are such athletes, but you have to, it's a little bit like gymnastics. You still have to stand there and look pretty and smile. Do you train for that? That you have to practice doing that you're not making a grimacy concentration face, while you're spinning at ridiculous amounts?
Yeah, Yeah, skating is it's a performance and it's part of our score. So right from the start, you're just taught that, 1 minute you're running around at 20 miles an hour across the ice, jumping into the air and turning 3 times, and the next you have to be a ballerina. So you do all the off ice training for it, all the ballet, and you become very body aware of what you need to bring to get the scores you want.
But that doesn't mean you can train your face.
No, well, yeah, I feel like you have to. Like that was part of it. It's just like you knew you had to be performing. So that was part of the act.
It's so hard though, because I know even just like working live and things are going sideways and it's really hard sometimes to just keep smiling through it, where what you want to do is scream.
Well, it's horrible when you make a horrible mistake and you're on the ice and you have to get up and you have to then get back into character, which could be this, lively, happy character that you have to get back into. And you're like, oh, just shut off the music already.
Yeah. You retired from competing very, very young. Mm-hmm. Why?
I think people are always so confused by it, but it was just a different time in our sport. We, in the early 90s, figure skating was huge. It was at the height of its
enormous.
It would rival football numbers with all the different types of productions and shows and made for TV events that they had. And, it was right after Nancy and Tanya and all of that attention came. And I was skating at the time, and that was in 94. And then my Olympics was in 98. So the opportunities were endless. And at that time, growing up in the sport, you looked at Kristi Yamaguchi, Oksana Bayul, all of these skaters that, because there was so much opportunity, they didn't stick around for more Olympics. They immediately went on to skate with Scott Hamilton, with Stars on Ice and Champions on Ice, and do all of these professional events, which you couldn't be amateur and compete anymore. So I feel like when I was a little girl, I have pictures with Scott, Hamilton going to Stars on Ice in my big Blossom hat, thinking, oh my gosh, one day if I win the Olympics, they'll ask me to go on tour. So for me, it was always a no-brainer. As long as I accomplish, hopefully winning that medal, I just had hope to move to that next, glamorous phase of figure skating at the time.
Do you ever look back and regret it?
To move on?
To move on that early?
Oh God, no. No, it was for so many reasons. Skating's popularity is not the same. And I was able to, the next, 5, 6, 7 years on Stars on Ice, really get to live skating at its best and perform around the country and, to sold out Madison Square Garden and become an entertainer and work with Scott and Kristi and Katarina and all of these amazing people that I looked up to. And by far, those touring years were probably the best years of my young life. I think back on them so fondly, but then more importantly, I think that I'm so glad that I had to move on. I had to figure out what was next, because that prepared me to keep doing that in my life, where you see that Olympians really, all athletes, but especially Olympians in niche sports, they really struggle that all of a sudden at 28, they retire, at 30, they retire, and their entire world is turned upside down because all they know was that one thing. And all they know is how to go to a training center and compete. And for me, I kind of stayed on track with kids my own age of going to school and, figuring out life after school. So I'm grateful that I did it that young. So I was forced to move on with my life.
Was it hard to go back to normal life, or had you never really had normal life?
I never really had normal life. And I still think, my life is still different. So different than a normal life from skating. But again, back to my point of retiring from the amateur world at 15, going into the professional world, it was still not normal. We're flying all over the world for these shows, but at the same time, it's normal life seeped in slowly. I wasn't training those hours. I was able to go to a Starbucks and think oh, this is what people do in the morning. They walk in and they get a coffee and they sit down and they're not training all day. So, I was slowly getting adjusted to a normal life.
Did you ever go to a traditional school?
I did. So my parents were not into sports, and they didn't understand the homeschooling thing at the time. And
it also wasn't as big of a deal.
Right. Right. And I went to school in class, but it was getting out of hand. I was having to wake up at 3 a.m. and skate because like the rink didn't have enough ice time, and skate from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. and I was getting hurt. So eventually, instead of doing a typical homeschool, my dad and my mom kept me enrolled into my high school, and I had 3 tutors that worked with the school, and every day I was on the same courses and doing everything that my friends and students that actually went to the school did. So it was a bit tough because they traveled with me and it wasn't typical homeschool, but I eventually I had to change my schedule or I would have never been able to train.
You got to look back now and say, wow, my parents had foresight that you would need a legitimate education.
Correct. And I think it's great that they were never really sports focused. They were, they kind of, they're hard workers themselves. So they made sure that if we were doing this and giving up so much, financially living apart, that I was going to work hard, very hard, but never to the point where I felt like I couldn't say, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. They would have been fine.
Which is a gift.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a gift. You started, God, it seems like forever, but you started commentating in 2010. Mm-hmm. How hard was it to learn to be, and I went through this myself, to be honest about what you were seeing? Because I go back and think about the red carpets and it takes you a minute to find your groove, especially working live. But then you also, as we did with fashion, as much as we had fun, you also have to be honest.
And it's a learning curve. I remember when I first started commentating, it's a hard job to get in figure skating just because, these commentators last a very long time. They're legends themselves and it's a cycle, but I really wanted to try because I felt like it was going to give me that same, like live television was going to give me that same adrenaline rush.
It's such an adrenaline rush.
Yeah. So I'm always looking for that since I retired from skating, and live television hit the spot. So at first it's funny because I put on the headset and people are talking in your ear and I'm like, why did I choose this? Why didn't I do something like very chill? Like what? And I realized, oh, it's because like you actually live for that feeling. But yeah, I think in the beginning, I watched all of the great commentators of figure skating, their videos, their tapes, and then I realized, and I remember talking to someone, they were like, you just take that all in, but when you put that headset on, you have to just be you, or it's not going to be genuine. It's not going to be right. It's not going to feel authentic. And so I just winged it and just was myself and really hoped that what I was saying, as truthful as I had to be, was never going to come across as, or hurt a skater's feelings. But at the same time, you have to tell it like it is.
Yeah, you have to be critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to critique and analyze. That is my job. So there's always a fine line, and I've been there, so I know what it's like. And I think there's a certain way that it can be done. And I try to do my best, but sometimes we just got to call it like it is.
So I want to go back to the first time you worked live. And I always joke, I don't know if you can do this, where you can be having a conversation with someone and you can literally be listening to a conversation across the room at the same time. I'm always like, because there's always multiple voices in my head.
Yeah.
But it drives people crazy. So because you're like, you in the middle of a conversation, you could be like, yeah, that's that, and then you can come right back to where you were.
Exactly, which is it must just happen over time.
It does.
Sure you feel this way, but you don't even realize it's happening. But today I was doing a satellite tour and I didn't even realize it till the interview was over because I'm so used to so many things happening that another show was playing in my ear, like something got disconnected. Another show was playing in my ear, and then I was getting questions like very faintly over that, and you just get so used to it. Yeah. You don't even notice.
Oh yeah. My friends still make fun of me that I can, again, have a conversation and answer a question that 2 people over are talking to me. Yeah. They're like, how can you do both? I'm like, years of voices in my head. Exactly. So you and Johnny Weir, I like to think of you as the Joan and Melissa of ice skating.
Right? Oh my God. That's so
great. You are, even with the fashion.
Oh my goodness.
Was there chemistry between you guys the very first time you were on air?
There was, and we knew of each other. Skating is a small world, but we didn't know each other very well before we came together to commentate. And we weren't even supposed to commentate together. He was supposed to take the men's and I was taking the women's. And that whole year we just hang out in the studio hallways waiting. And we just started talking, and it was just instant. It was like that very casual where you feel like this person, and we realized obviously our life experience is so similar, but it's like when you talk to someone that lived your life and in the same way and thinks about things in the same way that you do and has that same perspective and sense of humor. And I was like, this is my soulmate. Yeah. This is it.
Sort of. He's your spirit animal.
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever I know even when I just see pictures of him, and he did Fashion Police with me, I covet his handbag collection.
He has the best handbag collection of all time.
How many Birkins do you think he has?
I think he switches them out, but he has, a good amount. He loves an Hermes bag.
Yes, yes, he does. And he and I are like this with that.
Well, what's funny is I always teased him because I would say, like, I am never spending that amount of money on a bag. He'd take me to Hermes every place he'd go, and I just thought he was crazy. And I always said, never would I do that. And then we were in Tokyo this last year, or 2 years ago, I guess at this point, for the Olympics. And he went in and I went with him, and I usually go for like the tea and the chocolates that they bring. Right. And they pull out this bag that's just so stunning. And it's this creamy white color. And I'm like, oh my God.
Which one? Was it a Birkin? Was it a Kelly? Was it a Constance? What was it?
It was a Birkin. And it was like creamy vanilla. And it was just so beautiful with gold hardware. And I left and I was like, Johnny, I want one, I think. And he's like, just let's do it. Let's splurge. Let's do it. He's like, I'm going to call them. I'm going to see if they have another one. And he's like, it's unlikely. There was only 2 in the country. Somehow Johnny figured this out. And then they called me and they were like, we actually have another one if you'd like it. And I didn't know what to do because now I was put on the spot. And this was like a purchase that I just thought I would never, ever make in my entire life.
It's an investment.
Yes, I just was like, this is so silly. What am I doing? But I did it. And now we have obnoxiously, we have matching ones. But it's okay. I always tell him because I'm still nervous about it, but I'm like, you know what? I haven't bought a bag since. It's fine. I'm making up for it.
Yeah. After my mom died, I bought a green, like this beautiful malachite green Birkin. And I remember calling my business manager and saying, can I do this? And he said, yes, but don't make a habit of it.
Yep. Yeah. I'm terrified to buy another bag now because I'm like, I need to pay that bag off.
It's got to be.
I don't feel good about it.
You two shopping has to be hilarious.
It is hilarious. And we've also got to the point, where we travel and pack and we don't even call each other anymore. I know what I know the 4 different outfits, the type that he's going to bring. He knows what I'm going to bring. We know the colors we like, and then we match them all up when we get there. And it's just so seamless now that it's hilarious.
Because I read that in 2018, you two brought your entire wardrobes to the games.
Yeah, we brought a lot. I mean, they expect a lot of different outfits.
Well, you guys have set yourself up
for this. Well, that's the big problem. We really have. You do one interview and then you go to another and they expect you to be, well, okay, what are you wearing to this one? Because this is what you do. And then you're like, well, I don't know. I'm gone for 3 weeks somewhere. How do I have 40 outfits?
Oh, yeah. And do you hang the tags on them with them labeled?
Yeah, we'll sometimes do that. We get the luggage racks inside, and then because we also have to match, which makes it even more complicated.
Well, it's hard to match with him.
It is, but we always find a way. We always have a theme. We always have colors that we coordinate with. It's our little thing. As skaters, you had to present on the ice. So I think we're so used to this that when we go on air, we're like, okay, we have to show up.
It's hilarious. That's hilarious to me because everybody who travels like that, you have the tags or you have the photos. Always, and like when I would do a press tour, everything would be labeled, hung together, all that stuff. And people don't get that. It's like, and you're changing multiple times a day. And because you guys have set yourself up as the fashion people, there's more pressure. Yeah. It's just, it's a lot now, but we've actually pared down our suitcases because like I said, we've
streamlined it where we actually know what we're going to wear. And sometimes now we'll just show up and he'll just be like red. And we just figure it out.
Right. What happens when someone doesn't like what the other one is wearing? I could see you being gentle about it. I could see him sending you back to change.
Yeah. So, well, what's great, Johnny is also the ultimate gentleman. So if there's something that like he wants to wear this and I want to wear this, and I'm like, but Johnny, I feel more comfortable in this. He's amazing. He's 100%, whatever you want. He's the best work hubby and life hubby, even though I have a husband.
I'm sure your husband's thrilled to hear that.
As you can get. So he's great with that. And there are times like I'm very gentle, but there was like, we laugh because he always will gauge like if he's gone too far by me. And we have this running joke and he's always like, you always give me this sweet answer. And I know, okay, I'm pushing it. And then he's like, sometimes it's just the look. And I know I've gone too far and I got to go back and change.
Let's talk about your new show, Wedding Talk.
Yes.
You come across always so like joyous and happy. It feels like this was a perfect match for you.
It really was. When I got this offer, I thought, this is my dream job. Seriously. Like, I love hosting. I love broadcast. I love sports. I love my sport. But to be able to talk about love and weddings and events and decor, that is just so up my alley. And I am a hopeless romantic and planning my own wedding. I was so involved. I loved every part of it. I'm the person that still thinks and talks way too much about the wedding. And, can't wait to do vow renewals someday. So this show is really a perfect match for me.
It's on Chicken Soup for the Soul, but explain to people what the show is.
Yeah. So it's on Chicken Soup for the Soul, but also Crackle. So if you just download those apps to your TV, you'll stream it for free. But it is, it's a really cool concept because it's not just your traditional wedding or traditional wedding videos that you might think of. And when I sat down in the chair the first time and watched the films, because I have to call them films now because it is not a wedding video. It blew me away. My husband's a doc director, and when he watched it, he's like, oh my goodness, this footage is stunning. So visually it's beautiful, but also the way that they put the films together and incorporate the couple's love story is so emotional. I had Kleenex there every day. And okay, so let me take you through what the show is. We follow probably about 3 couples each episode. Each episode has a theme. We'll take you on big extravagant weddings, destination weddings, backyard weddings, isolated locations where people get married in front of a volcano erupting. So we kind of span across the spectrum for every type of wedding there is. And then you just get to know about the couple. And we also work with Jove Meyer and Jose Rolón, who are incredible wedding planners themselves, and they're on the show. And I just have them help us break down everything. What's trending, what's hot, what's not. And the inspiration you get from watching these episodes is so fun. I'm so mad that this show wasn't around when I was getting married.
Okay, what wedding no-nos have you learned? That sometimes when you're watching these videos, you're like, oh God, this isn't going to end well.
Well, some of them don't end well, and some of them, because they don't end well, are more charming. And I find that when I look back on the episodes, I'm like, oh, that poor couple that sat in torrential rain and just kept going. Somehow, like, it was the sweetest thing. And
my cousin had to and his wife had to move their wedding into a Chinese restaurant because there was a blizzard.
Yeah, like you can't account for all the things that can go wrong in a wedding, because so many things can go wrong. And we do one episode where we kind of go through everything that goes wrong in a wedding. But I think what I liked about this show is just, again, it's not just a traditional wedding. It's really getting to know these couples, and they give you ideas because each partner is so different with what they want for their special day that for me, I thought, oh, I had all the personalized touches in my wedding, and I wasn't even close. After watching this show, I'm like, I need to redo it. I need to redo it.
Because I always think, you can see things coming. You're like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Do you think you've become sort of an expert in that?
I have, but I feel also like as I get older, I kind of love when things go wrong, and then it's almost the imperfect part of it makes it more perfect to me. and I think like watching these episodes, there's some weddings that are just, oh, they went off without a hitch. It was just gorgeous. It was perfect. And then there's ones where, yeah, it was flying by the seat of your pants, but all of them, that's why the Kleenex was next to me. I just tears like, and this is the best part of the show. Usually I'm talking skating and I get emotional with that, but this is a whole new level.
What would you change about your wedding now that you've moved into sort of this level of expertise?
I know, it's hard because I think back, and again, I love everything that happened to our wedding, good, bad, all of it, because it was ours. But there's things that I get confused about because I'll see these weddings, that are these couples like getting married on top of a glacier, and what they do with their photos and what they do with the day is just so special. And I'm like, Todd, maybe we should have just got married alone like that, and we didn't need. And then on the other hand, then I see this other wedding with 300 people, and I'm, oh my God, they thought to do that with all their guests. Like, I want to do that too. And he's like, you can't just have all, like, what do you want to do? Do you just want to have a wedding every week? I'm like, probably.
How did you and Todd meet?
We met at the sports Emmys. He was accepting an Emmy and I was there with NBC presenting an Emmy to him. So we actually have a photo of him getting his Emmy, and I didn't meet him that night. And then his aunt is Chris Jansing, who works for NBC, and I met through the Olympics. And she emailed me. She's like, do you know you gave an Emmy to my nephew? He actually lives in LA. And so she set us up over email, and that was it.
Wow. How many years now?
6 months later, we were engaged. And then we were together 2 years while planning the wedding. And so altogether 7 years, but married 5.
And do you still love it every day?
You know what I do? Like, marriage to me is like this, obviously it's this ever evolving thing that you look back to those first honeymoon days and you're like, oh my God, that was so amazing. But the more that we've gone through, and we've gone through a lot together, it's just that like warm, fuzzy feeling of this is your person, and you get through the hard stuff and you get through everything that life throws at you. I've had a hard couple years with a lot of other things, and he's just been there by my side, as my rock. And I can't imagine life without him.
Yeah, because you brought that up. You've been very vocal or open about some of your health struggles.
Yes.
What compelled you to do that?
Well, I haven't told the whole story yet, just because I need to personally, get to a good place. But I have struggled, the last couple of years with so many different things, health-wise. And endo was, the basis and a large part of that. And I struggled with that probably for years, and was just misdiagnosed. And it's so sad because women with endometriosis, on an average, it takes about 10 years to get diagnosed, because again, it's a women's health issue. It's kind of just pushed to the side. It's like, oh, you have a painful cramp, no worries, and yeah. you don't realize that this is, a serious disease that is painful and can affect the quality of your life.
It is people, again, women's health is a whole separate podcast.
Yeah.
You're so cheerful and
Am
so,
I?
yeah. And so light. And I mean, this show is such a perfect match for you. Are there days you ever want to close the door and put your face in a pillow and scream? Because you're not, your image is so bubbly. You're almost not allowed to have a bad day somewhere.
Yeah. I definitely do. And I give myself the grace to do that. I find, I always say this to my friends, I find that I don't ever feel depressed. If anything, I feel anxious. I'm a worry wart. I channel all of that energy into anxiety. And, I may not go sit in my room and just, be untouched for days on end. But I find that, now being able to go to my support group of friends and family and Todd, and, when all these worries seem overwhelming, I'm not always the most cheerful person, and it's okay to have those days and get through that. And, it's part of life, right? Everyone's got their.
I'm scared to ask because, like I said, you have so many different lines on your resume. What's next? Other than promoting the show?
So, I always feel like if I sit too long in one thing, I get so antsy. I'm always ready for the next thing. And sometimes I feel like I take things on that I'm terrified of, because then I'm like, wait, what did I want to do and get myself into? I know nothing about this. But again, from skating, I think I learned to wing it, and either it works or it doesn't. But probably the most recent thing that we've been having a lot of fun with is my husband is a director, and we last year put together a 4-part series for Peacock called Meddling. And we did it together. I executive produced and he directed, and it was so much fun to work together and form this production company. And I think, I definitely want to dip my toe more into those waters where we can work together and think of really interesting and engaging projects.
Well, Tara, it is always a joy to talk to you.
Thank
you so much. Everyone needs to check out the new show on Crackle and on Chicken Soup for the Soul, both streaming platforms. And the show is called Wedding Talk. I can't wait to sit down and watch all my episodes.
Oh, thank you so much.